It's the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Andrew Meyer in the host chair today. Thanks for joining us. By any metric, food waste is a huge problem in this country and across the globe. In the United States, food waste is estimated to be about 30 to 40% of the food supply. That according to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Department of Agriculture. And the United Nations estimates that food waste is contributing 5% of total global greenhouse gas emissions. All that and the fact that millions of Americans face hunger challenges on a daily basis. There are several organizations that are not just targeting food waste, but turning that waste into rescue by getting it to the people in need. This hour, we'll start by discussing local food rescue efforts. With me to do that are Crystal Franklin, Food Rescue Partnership Manager at the Hunger Network. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And Kim Johnson joins us by phone. She's the Akron Site Director of Food Rescue US. Kim, thanks for calling in.
Good morning.
And if you'd like to join the conversation, you can call us at 866-578-0903. You can email us at soi@ideastream.org or tweet us. We're at Sound of Ideas. And later in the program, we'll share an excerpt of a recent City Club of Cleveland conversation on how Cleveland is hoping to become known as a dual waterfront city. And we'll share what residents thought of our Sound of Ideas community tour last night, which talked about the future of Shaker Lakes, held at the Shaker Lakes Nature Center. It was a great turnout and our first held in the outdoors, as well as an engaging and lively conversation. But first, let's talk about food waste. Let's start with you, Crystal. The Hunger Network has been around for 40 years, first called the Hunger Task Force. But this food rescue aspect of your mission didn't get going until around 2018. How did it become part of the Hunger Network's mission?
Yeah, so we started seeing that there was a disconnect between our hunger relief program. That was our original program. We have consortium of hot meal and pantry sites, but we still saw that our community members weren't being reached. And we know that the biggest barrier to food access is transportation. So we decided to start meeting our neighbors where they were at. And so 2018, we partnered with Food Rescue Hero. They're located in Pittsburgh, and they have this awesome, innovative technology. It's an app that they make for your city, and it's a good way to fight food waste, sustainability, and feed your hungry community members. And so it's similar to DoorDash or Uber, but for nonprofits and people wanting to do good. So people can download their app on the smartphone and see that there's a rescue from their local Giant Eagle, a few boxes of produce going to their local YMCA. And so they can claim the rescue, and it will give them all the instructions on who to pick up from, where to go, photos, instructions, and same with on the agency side, all those instructions as well. It takes less than an hour of their day. We keep it within the same community of the donor, so 5 to 10 miles. That way we're not off-putting any carbon emissions or the food's traveling longer than it needs to.
Kim, similar question to you, and I know this Akron site that you're working at is a separate site in a growing landscape of sites from Food Rescue US. What does that say about the need to curb food waste?
Definitely there's, an opportunity here just locally to continue to, reallocate the amount of food that is being, sent to the landfill and reallocate that over to those that need it. So we've started something here locally approximately about a year ago, just trying to understand if there was an opportunity, and we've quickly seen that yes, we can fill a gap and provide this excess food to those receiving agencies, very similar to the Hunger Network.
So I want to get your thoughts on the ultimate goal of food rescue programs. Is it to stop food from ending up in landfills, or is it to feed a hungry community member? I'll start with you, Kim.
I think it's both. I think it's, that's the great part of our mission, is that it can do both of those things and solve both of those, problems. So we are, reducing food waste out there while also redirecting it to those that need the food.
Crystal, your thoughts?
I completely agree with what Kim was saying. It takes a lot to be able to rescue the food that you know is going to go to waste to feed the hungry community members, and you also need a core of volunteers. So it really takes a lot to do this initiative.
Can you talk a little bit about the misconceptions that there are around food rescue? What if someone, for instance, gets sick from donated food? What are the actual rules around food donations from those who supply it, the restaurants, the bakeries, all those organizations?
Yeah, great question. So the government has tried to develop a lot of laws and bills passed so that community can help each other out. One, for example, is the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act that protects mainly donors from being held liable with the food that they're being donated. There's also the Food Donation Improvement Act that's more so on the agency side so that they're able to distribute the food in good faith as well. Ohio state law has a few things in there as well, protecting donors and receiving agencies to do what they think is best in good faith with the food.
Let me ask you, Kim, what about those misconceptions? Is that something that you also have to deal with?
Yeah, definitely. There's some misconceptions out there that this food cannot be, donated. And it's just alleviating some of those concerns or fears or, debunking those myths. So definitely, as Crystal said, those protections are in place. There is no liability for them to do so, again, as long as it's in good faith that the food is, edible and consumable from their standpoint.
So this is a relatively young effort, didn't really get off the ground until 2018. Does that speak to some of the misconceptions, or were there other hurdles in the food donation process to really taking this tack on addressing food waste?
I think a misconception that places have, I would say more donor side, is that they don't think that they have food waste. So it really takes, their staff watching out for what they're throwing out that day or what they think may be trash. It's one bad strawberry in a whole bunch. We simply take that donation and we glean it a little bit, and then the food is still perfectly good to eat there.
Crystal, Kim, are there other misconceptions about what is really not food waste, but something that needs to be in the pipeline for people who need it?
I would just say that, sometimes there's a misconception about, well, we don't have that much. And it's still, every little piece is important. If it's food, there is no minimum. There's donations available people that we can feed with that donation. So we collect from some donors, boxes and boxes one day, and the next day they might have minimal, and they are very concerned about that. And it's okay. Every little bit, if it's only a half a box, that's okay. It still is going to feed more people.
Again, if you'd like to join the conversation, you can call us at 866-578-0903. Got questions about the app? You can email us at soi@ideastream.org. You can also tweet us. We're at Sound of Ideas. Kim, that app, can you walk us through the Food Rescue Hero app and how it works for the uninitiated?
Sure. We actually have a separate app from Food Rescue Hero. Ours is Food Rescue US. So it's a separate application that they would basically go to our website, sign up to be a volunteer. It gives them, once they've signed up, they can go in and view a schedule of all the rescues that we have available. Again, we're primarily within the Summit and Medina County area, but we can do some on the cursory areas as well. We're approximately doing 160 rescues a month. So there's something most likely near you. It shows on the schedule what that time is, where the donor is, where the receiving agency is, so you can quickly see what that would look like. Again, very similarly, these are rescues that are typically taking between 30 and 60 minutes to complete. You go pick up the food, it gives you all the instructions of who you are going to contact there, let them know that you're here for the food donation, and then where you're taking that food to, and then dropping that off. Once you drop off the food, we just ask that you record some basic information. You could say that you completed the rescue, and then ideally take a picture so that we can, share with partners and media about what the work is that we're doing. So it's a very, very simple process, and it's very flexible to volunteers that may not have, a lot of time.
And then, Crystal, I assume the Food Hero app is the same way, or it's very similar?
Yeah, basically the same to what Kim was saying. I would say that they're very similar in the model and how they work. Less than an hour, keeping within the same neighborhood, instructions, photos, everything you may need.
Do the drivers the volunteers get special training for this when they participate as part of the pickup team?
Yeah, good question. So when our volunteers download the app, we have a team member send out a text message with additional information and training. So we have Thrive training. It's an online quick course that volunteers take, and they learn a little bit more about what it means to be a safe food handler.
When we're talking about getting food that's not ready for the garbage can, for the landfill, it's about, number one, recognizing the fact that it's still good, it's still edible, it's still tasty. Kim, let me ask you, once you pick up the food, how do your drivers ensure that it stays good as long as possible?
Sure. They're, again, following food safety guidelines. They're ensuring that their vehicle is clean, their hands are clean, they're transporting this in a safe manner. They're going directly from the food donor to the receiving agency site, just handling and following all those steps along the process. And then the receiving agency then takes it from there to ensure the distribution continues in a safe manner.
An email from Mimi in Shaker Heights, who writes, food rotting in landfills emits methane, which heats the climate 80 times as much as carbon. Donating or composting food, it's an amazing way to save our climate, doing some good by helping those in need and helping the planet at the same time. Thank you, Mimi, for that comment. Chris, let me ask you about the type of donors that you typically go to most often. Who are they, and what size businesses are we talking about?
Yeah, our biggest donor is Giant Eagle and Get-Go. They work a lot with other food rescue hero agencies, but we also work with small mom and pop bakeries, coffee shops, all the way up to wholesale produce. Catered events, corporate restaurant spaces, co-working spaces, really anywhere people are set to be and have food and it's handled by professionals, we're able to come and rescue it. And we also have a dispatch line. If anybody's questionable, hey, is this something that they can take? You can always reach out to our dispatch line and we'll be able to let you know if it's a donation we can take.
Similar situation in Summit and Medina, Kim?
Yes, I would, fully support Crystal's answer. We've also, just being in the summer months, give a shout out to the community farmers markets. Those are great sources as well of fresh produce that we've seen. So really, there's excess food everywhere, which is available to be redirected.
So are there businesses that are more difficult that you found to get on board that would be valuable partners in this, Kim?
Can't speak to anything specific.
Crystal?
I would say one thing our partners are looking for a lot is prepared foods. A lot of the people that are fighting food insecurity have a busy, chaotic schedule, and they're looking for prepared foods and ready to go. So caterers, people that prepare the foods, I would say.
Our opening conversation today is about reducing food waste and doing more to make sure it gets used before it actually goes bad. We are joined by Crystal Franklin from the Hunger Network in studio, and by phone, Kim Johnson with Food Rescue US in Akron. We've been talking a lot about the giving side, the donors. I want to pivot now to the recipients. Can you explain a little more in detail who they are and how you get connected with them? Crystal, you can go first.
Yeah, so one really unique thing about our program is, yes, we partner with hot meal and pantry sites, but we also partner with what I call non-traditional sites. So these are community centers, schools, clinics, living facilities such as low-income, senior, transitional housing. Really anywhere people are set to be that day, we try to meet them where they're at and send them home with a bag of food. And so we started reaching out to local community centers more, I would say, and then it just kind of goes word for mouth. They tell other people that they know, and we get them all on board.
Is there a vetting process on who gets donations? Kim, I'll have you jump in on this one. Is there ever a cutoff in terms of income, for instance?
So we partner with area nonprofits that we don't set any kind of guidelines on. As long as they're feeding, people that need the food, we don't send any specific guidelines because we're not handing out the food specifically to individuals. Those receiving agencies would set whatever guidelines they would follow.
And Crystal, your model, is it similar?
Yeah, it's similar to what Kim was saying. We don't really set any guidelines. We are trusting in good faith that this food is going where it needs to go, and we keep in contact with all the site managers to ensure so.
I wanted to find out about the connections with community groups that help make your job a little bit easier. The connections with community centers, senior centers, other vulnerable populations, and connecting with them. Crystal?
Yeah, so we connect with them in the way of starting to do collaborations like tabling, helping with events that they may have, making sure that they have food for the community members. A lot of the times I hear that when food is set down in their community rooms, people come together and they're actually able to form a sense of communityship. And that's what I really like, that food brings people together, we see often.
And Crystal, I'm sorry, Kim, when we're talking about the app, which both of your organizations have one, a lot of times individuals who don't have access to food, enough food, they may not have access to technology as well. So Kim, can I ask you to explain how you bridge that gap when the app simply isn't an option for individuals trying to connect?
Sure. So the app is primarily used by the volunteers as well as some donors and receiving agency administrators. But again, the individuals receiving the food, are not, not kind of in the app.
And Crystal?
Yeah, agreeing to what Kim says, the app is primarily used for our volunteers to kind of download, and they're the transportation piece. For us, our operations is mainly it's me or another team member, community, connecting with a site manager and connecting that way, and then they distribute everything to the clients.
We've talked a bit about the role that prepared foods play in this pipeline. What about fresh food and produce? How does that factor into how the apps can help? Crystal?
Yeah, so fresh food like bakery and produce is something that we started more primarily at. And I think that that is a high need because produce isn't something that's cheap and readily available. A lot of pantries may only serve shelf-stable things. And so right now we're looking at about 55% of what we get in food rescue being fresh produce. And I think that's really beneficial to the community members.
Kim, what about your capacity to handle the fresh foods, the produce, the non-shelf stable items?
Yeah, those are definitely the key items that we also see. These are items that are quickly moving away from, the donors, the restaurants, the retail stores, the gas stations that need to quickly, be consumed. So those are items that we definitely handle.
Understood.
And are needed in the community.
I want to work in another email here. Stephen writes, I love these programs and thank you both for your awareness. It would be great if we can get more organizations like this to expand the concept to non-food items, maybe even housing. Interesting food for thought, Stephen. Thank you very much for writing in and sharing that. Crystal, I want to ask you specifically about the potential challenges that you might face covering Summit and Medina in the urban versus rural needs of the communities you serve. Can you talk a little bit about how you're able to connect with donors and volunteers across that broad landscape?
Yeah, so we are located primarily in the heart of Cleveland. We cover all Cuyahoga County. We dabble a little bit in Lake Geauga, Lorraine, Summit. By dabbling, I would say if a donor reaches out, we try our best not to say no. So we find a house for it. Sometimes I often do try to refer other places a little bit on the perimeter of our service to other agencies since they have a little bit more local touch.
And Kim, I actually was thinking about you with Summit and Medina, so maybe that's a little more appropriate for the areas you cover where there's a broad range from rural to urban. Can you talk a little bit more about the challenges that you face?
Sure. Again, if we have a donation that is available, we will do our best to place that, again, within a relatively short distance to make it easy for our volunteers to deliver and ensure the food is as fresh as possible. So we'll go everywhere.
I want to try and bring things to a close here. Just wanted to get you each to talk about what's next for your organizations. Crystal, what's next for Hunger Network? I hear you want to expand a food rescue kitchen space.
Yeah, so that's definitely our next endeavor. Last August, we started in a cohort with La Soup. They run an amazing food rescue kitchen they have for many years. And so what they do now is they give back to the community by teaching them how to form a kitchen. And so we just graduated from that cohort. So we're really looking to put our toes in the sand and find a good place here in Cleveland to make a kitchen.
And Kim, next big thing, next big project for you and your organization.
Sure. So, like I said, we're about a year in only from our starting and kind of creating this initial framework of a network. We continue to build out that network with more and more donors excited for the opportunity and being able to provide this solution in this area. Have some exciting stuff happening behind the scenes. So more to come later this year, but some great things.
Well, thank you very much for that. We'll look forward to hearing more about that. Crystal Franklin from the Hunger Network and Kim Johnson from Food Rescue US, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Time now for a quick break, but on the other side, we'll learn about efforts to really spotlight Cleveland as a dual waterfront city, the topic of a recent City Club of Cleveland conversation. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Andrew Meyer. We'll be right back. You're with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Andrew Meyer. Thanks for being with us this hour. Cleveland is best known for being right on the coast of Lake Erie, but locals know it downtown is home to two historic bodies of water, including the Cuyahoga River. A recent City Club conversation, part of their outdoor summer series, hosted by IdeaStream's environment reporter Zaria Johnson, explored the idea that the city needs to be considered as a dual waterfront city, one where the lakefront and riverfront are equally vital to our urban core. The conversation featured a panel of architects and community leaders who shared impactful ways to transform connectivity between the two shores and the downtown core. Next, we'll hear an excerpt from that informative conversation. You can hear the entire conversation by going to the link on our show page, ideastream.org/SOI. Since this conversation is on tape, we can't take your calls, but please email us with your thoughts at soi@ideastream.org. Here's Zaria Johnson.
Today, I'll be in conversation with Melanie Cortica, Executive Director of the Urban Land Institute Cleveland, Allison Lucasy Love, Managing Director of Major Projects at Greater Cleveland Partnership, and Gregory Soltis, a Senior Designer at RDL Architects. Please join me in welcoming Melanie, Allison, and Gregory. So before we get started, we'd like to encourage our audience members here in person and over the live stream to just take a minute to think about your favorite place to view the lakefront or the riverfront. And think about how you would walk there from here in Playhouse Square. If you're thinking that it might be difficult, or you might have a hard time navigating, or it might not be possible at all, then this might be a conversation that'll stick with you. So just keep that in mind as we're talking a bit today. So Allison, I want to start with you, and I'd like you to talk a bit about the Cleveland to Coastland Partnership. We know that it represents a few different specialties from the design community, real estate development, architecture, planning, and engineering, and maybe even more. So can you tell us about what the partnership is and how it came to be and what the need for it is here in Cleveland?
Absolutely. Thank you, Zaria. Thank you, everyone, for being here and to contribute to this important conversation. So in fall of 2023, about the time that the city was revealing its North Coast Master Plan, there was a lot of momentum happening with the Bedrock Riverfront Master Plan, everything going on around Irishtown Bend, lots of private public development conversations happening. I found that I was having a lot of conversations with individuals, with leaders of the AIA, ASLA, APA, ULI, but you know, the way that we kind of do things here, our sort of default is to do things in those silos. And so there wasn't a lot of conversation happening across those sectors. And it was really a sort of a spark of let's collaborate, let's bring everyone together, and very quickly this mutual interest in not only the waterfront developments that were happening from a major projects perspective, but the connectivity, and more so the lack of connectivity, and how do we create a Cleveland that works for everyone, and how do we really take this idea of a waterfront community and make it the reality. So it's not just it is more than a perception, it is that reality. So we came together, we planned a couple of events. Greg will go into the history that really laid the foundation of what led us to, in June, to create amazing race-style Design Your Own Adventure that started at North Coast Yard and dropped people off throughout the community at various points along the riverfront. And we asked people to design their own adventure, design their own walking path back to the lakefront. And while we had folks from, again, across sectors, architecture, landscape architecture, those involved in real estate, and other design professions, it was really interesting, and we'll go into some of the results that we found, just how many sort of aha and inspirational moments were created from just the simple act of walking your city, as opposed to kind of the way that we often navigate. And some of you might be thinking in your head, like, if I'm in Playhouse Square right now and I want to go down to the 9th Street Pier, I'm probably going to move my car. You don't have to do that, but that might be your first inclination. So this is really just the catalyst and the start of where we'd like to take this conversation of transitioning Cleveland into the coastland that it can and should be.
Thank you. And I'm glad that you mentioned a few projects that are kind of already underway, like the North Coast Connector, Irish Town Bend. And I know we're not here to talk about those projects, but I think it would be helpful to explain, Melanie, if you can, the role of this partnership in sort of taking us from these individual big projects to a well-connected city. What's needed, resources, approach, how do we get there?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm Melanie Kordick, again, Executive Director with the Urban Land Institute. The Urban Land Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan land use organization that really brings together, convenes individuals who work within land use and real estate. So these architects, these urban planners who got together during phase 2 and were dropped off at those 2 very important nodes, as Aria had just mentioned, from the riverfront to the lake, and walking to feel that connectivity. So combining those interdisciplinary partners is really key, like Allison had mentioned, to get a variety of feedback and opinions throughout that experience, and we'll continue to gather that feedback today as well. But we really want to create a coordinated framework between those projects. The Urban Land Institute can gather those interdisciplinary professions in various ways, like educational conversations like today, to continue that conversation. We've also recently done a project called a Technical Assistance Panel, where we studied the bulkheads infrastructure along the Cuyahoga River and how those could potentially be prohibitive to the economic development along the riverfront. That's a very specific land use issue that we were able to study to, again, talk more so about connectivity as a whole for the entire city.
Thank you, appreciate that. And Gregory, I want to bring you into this conversation too. Can you talk about how we got here? Many of us know that, or may know that Cleveland is an industrial city, but we may not understand the impact that has had when it comes to our access to the lakefront and the riverfront. Because can you set the stage for us? What does being an industrial city mean, and how does that create barriers that we see today?
Sure. We understand that we're an industrial city, but I don't think we often think about the fact that an industrial city was a new thing that came about as a result of the second industrial revolution in the late 1800s. And so this new city, had to be fashioned in order to receive mass amounts of raw material and then have places to, transform that raw material into finished goods and then ship that out into the world. So transportation networks become really primary. And we are in a perfect place in between the coal fields down in West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania, and where oil was discovered in Western Pennsylvania, and the materials that are needed to make steel, for example, that are up by Lake Superior, and we have a river and a lake. And the area down by the river wasn't really settled when we were a New England village, settled by people from Connecticut, because you could get malaria if you lived down there. So they built the city up here, and that left the riverfront, which was really great, and the river became a workhorse for industry, and the river valley filled up with docks and factories and railroads, kind of creating, an invisible, like a legacy of invisible water for us. Our ancestors looked at that as something great because it meant they could put food on the table, and they weren't necessarily so concerned about recreating on the river, although there were parks you could go to, like Edgewater. And a last aspect that I think is important to think about in laying the foundation is that, parks also were a relatively new thing, public parks in the late 1800s, which were kind of a reaction to the Industrial Revolution as well. And so, all this time now we're trying to overcome our industrial legacy without erasing it and mixing industrial uses, living, and other uses, recreational uses on the waterfront, and really making the connections from downtown to the river and to the lake better. So you would choose to walk from one to the other.
And so when we think about what we're dealing with today when it comes to access, can you tell me a little bit more about this Design Your Own Adventure sort of workshop activity and how the public helped you figure out where we are now and what that access looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take this one to begin with. So the idea of the Design Your Own Adventure kind of ended up into two parts. So we have Brian from VOCON, Brian Daly in the audience, who did a phenomenal job mapping what could be very obvious routes for folks to take. Especially, we were dropping people off in rather industrialized parts of the riverfront where they had never been on foot before. So we got a lot of feedback that folks were quite comfortable in these curated groups of multi-interdisciplinary professionals, but if they had just found themselves there where there's not yet the development pressures of the commercial or the recreational that we're seeing have more and more interest along our waterfronts, that there would have been a lack of confidence in how to navigate back into the city. And I think that what we, and those of us that are design professionals, this probably resonates, Kevin Lynch's Imaging the City, our perception of our environment, of the built environment, is so critical to our perception of safety and the way that we navigate. And most cities, and Cleveland is not exempt for this, we really think about in a series of islands or deserts or nodal opportunities. And that's where a lot of these major projects also come into play, where we've got phenomenal existing resources, whether it's Edgewater, as Greg mentioned, or potential plans as we see coming online at the lakefront and the riverfront. But the connectivity between those major projects and those places that we want to be is where the fabric kind of breaks apart. And so that's really where this initiative of From Cleveland to Coastland is interested in, that connectivity, which was the whole idea of asking people to on foot navigate through places that you don't often find yourself doing out of choice.
Yeah, I was going to add that, all of us who work in the design fields, architects, landscape architects, even civil engineers and other types of engineers that deal with the built environment, we get hired for a project and we work together on that project, but rarely do we think about the city as a design problem. Mm-hmm. And so this effort has really been about getting us all together to do something we all love. We all probably played SimCity when we were kids, like making our own city. But applying our love for Cleveland and our love for the built environment and working together on the city as a design problem rather than any one individual. And if you look at the history of our city, even Tower City, which is a prime example of how we tend to build around here, we get a big project and we do that big project and it's great, and then we do another one over here, but we don't always think about the connective tissue in between.
And I'm curious, kind of stemming from, again, the Design Your Own Adventure activity, were there any surprises? I'm sure you all had done the research, had done the higher level look at what access looks like, but were there any surprises for you that came directly from the community? Melanie, do you want to start? Sorry to put you on the spot. But.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely very interesting to see the photos and the videos that we gathered from people, some easy things that we had identified that are immediate fixes that we could potentially take on, like wayfinding. How do you start right here and find your way to the lake or the river? So that's something simple that our group can collaborate on, and then we can continue this conversation. Today we have these boards in the plaza that people can interact with. We're going to continue saving this information and working together as a collaborative effort.
I think one thing that lots of the different groups came back with, there's very specific detailed information that we're sharing with our public partners who are the owners and that have the true opportunity to implement some of these suggestions. But overall, this idea of bringing more joy to the community. So, if you think about the East Bank of the Flats and the topography, the difference from the warehouse district, or if you're out where City Hall is on Lakeside Avenue, again, the the topographical difference between getting down to the lakefront. If you drive that might not be so much of your perception, but if you walk that, if you're pushing a stroller, if you're in a wheelchair, you definitely notice that there's not shade, there's not really places to stop for people to gather that are comfortable, that are convenient, that give you confidence that you're even headed in the right direction, that there is a body of water at the end of this walk. But thinking about ways that we can just improve those little places where you might start to think to yourself, why didn't I jump in my car? Why didn't I hop on the RTA? Because when you are experiencing something on foot, you're getting just a whole different sense of the city. You're hearing the music coming from the music boxes. Again, you're not hearing that if you're in your car, right? You're experiencing Cleveland in a whole different way, and that's what we want. We want people on the streets. I mean, we want people to be sitting out here like we all are doing now. And how do we encourage that on a daily basis without having to design events around it is, again, I think another key learning opportunity that came out of our walking tour.
Any thoughts, Greg?
Yeah, I was thinking about, we were like, Euclid Avenue is behind us, and Euclid Avenue, we thought about that once as a project, and I think there's some successful results from it. Even just the patterning of the sidewalk gives identity to the street as a place. And I think if we did more of that, and I think that's what came out of, a lot of people's responses, is like the street didn't necessarily feel great. As Ali said, there wasn't shade, there wasn't a place to sit, but it also didn't have a clear design and identity as a place. And if you think of some of the greatest streets in the world, you can imagine them in your head. If you've traveled to other cities, they have clear identities with an architectural language that's expressed in the street lamps and the texture on the sidewalk and the choice of the furniture and even the types of plants that are planted. And so a little bit more of that in our city would go a long way, because we live in a really beautiful city with lots of great districts and spots, but the space in between is often like a no man's land.
And I wanted to ask you, when it comes to a vision for a well-connected Cleveland, are there comparable cities that have done this work well that we could potentially model after? But also, how do we do that work without copy-pasting a solution from another city into Cleveland, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so we talk a lot in our city about Chicago, and we look to Chicago because, they have a great lakefront with parks on it and everything. And there are some comparisons, just like there's comparisons to, with Cleveland to a lot of other cities, but in many ways, Cleveland is different. Cleveland's built on a bluff above the waterfront. We didn't have a fire like Chicago, so we didn't have the opportunity to just replan the whole city, have Daniel Burnham there to, create this great plan. I personally think that Toronto has a lot of lessons we can learn. They're a very dense, walkable city, but they also have a freeway that goes right along their waterfront and a very thin strip of land that you can build on. And they've done a really great job of making that a human-scaled place with public transit, lots of parks, lots of residential life. And I think one common thing, too, is that in many cities, they understand that you have a waterfront, you have a public space, and then you have a street, and then you have your buildings after that. And that gives everybody access to the water, and it actually generates a lot more activity, because I can live in that apartment and have just as great a view, even if as if my apartment was right on the water, right? And then the shops down on the ground, they benefit from having the park and the water across the street. And that kind of setup, if we could do more of that here, over time, what we've tended to do, and maybe this goes back to the legacy of the factory had to be on the water, to ship things. And also we use the waterways, as a place to dump the waste, which people did for thousands of years. That was just a function of a river in a city. But I think if we could just rearrange our spaces a little bit and think about them a little bit differently, there's no telling how great we can become.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think there's a lot of opportunity to learn from other communities, and sometimes it's not, oftentimes I would encourage us not to just do the copy and paste of what looks like a success somewhere else. Dan said today, hey, Ferris wheel, that has been done. We don't necessarily, I don't think we need one here in Cleveland. The wind load would, ask anyone who's built something on the waterfront. But at the Greater Cleveland Partnership a couple of years ago, we did quite a bit of research into case studies. We looked at Seattle, Louisville, Cincinnati, other cities that have done this, and not necessarily, and certainly not just to copy and paste from a physical environment standpoint, but looking at the tools and the way that they were able to get this done. Because I think in a lot lot of us in the audience have probably felt this, whether you've been on the side of going to a public meeting over and over again for the same plot of land, and you're like, just make this the park already, right? That we do a lot of planning, and it's really time for us to start implementing. And I think because we are at such a critical time now where we are starting to see a lot of those economic development tools be put into place, and we are so close to building a lot of major projects that have been talked about for a long time, this is where it is also so critical to work on that connection, to make sure that we are preserving the space for the public boardwalk along the riverfront so that it doesn't become privatized. Because Cleveland, Ohio actually is the most privatized of all of the Great Lakes states when it comes to public access, and that's something that dates back to the public doctrine that's in effect here that says really the ordinary shoreline is the division between what is public and private space, which exists only here in Ohio and other states, Michigan most especially. They have changed that so that the land, the property landward of any body of water is inherently a public access point because it's a public good and not to be privately held. So there's a lot of policy too, I think, that we can adopt from other places to enable the projects that we're all really wanting to see happen here in our community.
I'm wondering if we can talk a bit about, again, focusing in on the partnership a bit. How unique is this approach to finding a solution for connectivity here in Cleveland? And Melanie, maybe we can start with you. I'm curious, what should city stakeholders be thinking about using collaboration to solve this problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been talking about how we see downtown as a fragmented space, and again, the connectivity, how challenging it is to walk from one area for another. However, there are partners in Cleveland who are doing amazing work, and again, busting these silos, working together in partnerships with not only the organizations that are here today, but additional organizations that are doing really great things on the water. I see some of them here today too. So, continuing to collaborate and connect and work together. For example, the Cleveland Metro Parks are doing an amazing job at laying down some infrastructure along the river. So if we do have an opportunity to have public access waterfront in the future, they are laying down that infrastructure to make that connectivity early so we can start working with those individual property owners who own property along the Cuyahoga River, for example. So there are, things in mind that we can do from the ULI perspective, stitching all of those efforts together. And making sure that everybody is communicating and open to collaboration.
Any other thoughts?
I don't know. I think it was. I'm sure they've done it other places. You don't want to be like, oh, I'm the first person who ever did this, because you're probably not. There's like 8 billion people on the planet.
Right.
But I think it's rare to get an interdisciplinary approach to a big design problem like this. And I know we're all having fun with it because I know lots of people, landscape architects and urban planners and stuff, we enjoy getting together and be able to do this because we haven't done it that much in the past, So I think that's been really great, is approaching it that way.
And I guess to add on that too, having those different perspectives gives you an opportunity to include diverse voices. So, encouraging that mobility throughout the city, regardless of income or who you are, making sure that that's accessible to everybody.
And before we head into Q&A, I want to ask, once this vision is achieved, can we talk a bit about the benefits that it'll have, not only for Cleveland residents, but tourists, visitors, the local economy? Greg, do you mind?
Well, yeah, the waterfront, people like being by water naturally, all people all around the world. And if we could leverage our waterfront more for living and entertainment, because the economy's changed, we still are an industrial city, we still have a good industrial base. But we have the opportunity now to leverage assets that a lot of cities don't have. And in talking about assets that a lot of cities don't have, we have water. A lot of cities have water. Many cities don't have waterfronts as spectacular as ours, with possibility, because maybe they're a city that's more inland on a river. But additionally, I think another one of our assets is our industrial heritage and our industrial architecture that's left over that I don't know that we appreciated enough, and we've demolished a lot of it. But it's one of the things that makes us very unique and would make us interesting to a lot of people who come here to visit. So I think as we develop the waterfronts, we need to be thoughtful about how we can weave things together instead of wholesale demolish an area and replant something new. but like weaves a lot of what's existing there, because that brick and the form of a factory and the smokestacks and even the bridges that we all love downtown, many or down in the flats, many of which are not functional anymore. Those are iconic things that are a part of who we are, and that creates this like connective tissue between all of our memories and the generation below us and the generation above, being able to tell stories and connect that story to an actual place or a thing.
Yeah, and I'll just say that the identity of Cleveland as a waterfront city is something that more and more partners are talking about, which is phenomenal, especially from a tourism perspective with Destination Cleveland. But what is going to work really well for Clevelanders and for all Clevelanders, including the least amongst us, is inherently going to be good for tourists. So if we really take the perspective of how we can include everyone, and I think that's the other thing that, we're talking about professional, largely design organizations starting this collaboration, but because it's an open process, the next couple of adventures we do, all of you, I hope will show up and invite your friends and your neighbors. It's really an opportunity for us to reclaim the community as ours and have an opportunity to share your feedback. That's what we're hoping you'll do at the Charrette today. And the identity of Cleveland, again, moving it from the sort of the headline and the logo and the branding to the reality for everyone, I think will be so critical. And in the vast community engagement that I've been a part of for the past couple of years, as we talk about repositioning ourselves as this coastland and this waterfront community, a lot of people have been really disconnected from these bodies of water, physically, socially, culturally, and so we have to understand that. We have to start from that place of healing and continue to move forward. I personally believe, and I think, again, by really being most inclusive and opening up this circle and this conversation will be a fantastic way to get us there, and to, again, truly just have that idea of a waterfront community resonate with everyone. Will improve our economy. It'll be great for everybody.
That was IdeaStream Zaria Johnson moderating a City Club forum on Cleveland as a dual waterfront city. You can check out the rest of the conversation by heading to our show page, ideastream.org/SOI. That just about wraps up the show for today, but before we close, we wanted to share some audience feedback that we got at the Sound of Ideas community tour, which took place at the Nature Center at Shaker Lakes last night. There was a packed house for the forum regarding the potential draining of Lower Shaker Lake. That's the recommendation from the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District that could avoid potentially catastrophic flooding. We heard a lot of passionate feedback from residents in and around Shaker Heights. Many of them focused their comments on the beauty of the Shaker Lakes and how the natural spaces are utilized by residents. Here's Terry, one of the attendees.
One of the things that I think is so extraordinary about this place, that I think is what many people are trying to articulate, is that it is a raw, naturalized environment. It is old. It has so much environmental depth and diversity to it. And that schemata over there looks like they just go in there with a bulldozer and claw the whole thing out.
And here are some thoughts from Michael on how he enjoys the space.
I come here 3 times a week to walk. And one of the things is, like last week, they had these beautiful flowers, wildflowers growing in the marsh. So I love coming here to walk, to get in my 5,000 steps a day.
Many of the attendees there were skeptical of the Regional Sewer District's plans. This is some feedback from Corby.
Basically, the sewer district has said not only are they not contributing their funding, putting our money back into our area, even though they need the Dome Brook for their stormwater management, but they also, a lot of us feel like they're going to block the savings of the saving of the Shaker Lakes.
Barb had this thought on one of the parties that's involved in the decision-making and how the dam at Shaker Lakes is classified or should be reclassified.
I think the bad boy in the story is the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Where are they? I want to hear directly from them why they think that's a Class 1. I would like the Ohio Department of Natural Resources to relook, based on all this new information, that maybe we're not a Class 1.
And finally, here's Molly, another resident of Shaker Heights, who echoed a sentiment we heard several times last night. And that's the transparency of the whole process.
There's been a lot of lost hope and understanding of the process. It feels like there's a lot that's happened behind closed doors. And we as citizens don't understand what the options are, and what we really need is to see a vision for the options.
Thanks again to everyone who attended last night. We'll bring you that community tour conversation this upcoming Monday, the 25th. And keep your eyes out for our next community tour stop.